Tony, you were very much a part of my musical coming of age, the soundtrack, if you like, because on the one hand I was hungry to learn all the classical repertoire as fast as I could, and on the other, my drug of choice, if you like, if I could use that metaphor, were the heavy-duty rock bands. And I mean, rock music then was so ambitious and theatrical and creative. It was, I can see why it would have attracted musicians who were from a classically trained background like yourself.
Well, I think it was in the late 60s, you know, pop music got more and more sort of interesting, I think, with things like obviously the Beatles and the Beach Boys and everything were getting more elaborate. But other groups kind of took over the baton. Groups like Procol Harum and Pink Floyd and Family, Fairport Convention. And we listened to these records and we loved them, you know. And we did this sort of pop album, Genesis Revelation. You know, to extend the songs, play around with structure as well as with chords and with rhythms and stuff, and try and do things that hadn't been done before. It's not that we didn't like straight pop music, we just thought, well, no one's really doing this.
Well, I mean, because of your classical training background, were you not tempted to go that way?
No, I was always into pop music. I mean, my classical playing was sort of, you know, I was more interested in the way it was all put together than I was in the playing of it, really. I would have quite happily always just been a writer and not a player. Never really intended to be a player. But then when the group started, and you know, out of the five of us, I played the best keyboards, and you know, that sort of seemed to be how it ended up a bit, really. You know,
I mean, that's clear when I listen to your stuff, whatever source it comes from, is that it feels as though it's evolving in the playing of it, as though the melodies are being created while you're playing them. There is that improvisatory kind of feel about it. Tony, I think melody is such a gift, and it is so underrated by so many people. Music today is all about the vertical, it's all about texture, and we've lost sight of that wonderful line that can really bring a piece to life, and that's why I applaud you for being a melodist.
Melody, since I come from the sort of rock pop world, I suppose, and melody is obviously a very important ingredient in that. To me, it's the natural thing. It's probably the thing that is the strongest reason for a piece existing. In my case, really, is the melodic line. You know, I was brought up on, well as pop music, I was brought up on things like Rodgers and Hammerstein and all that. And you know, Richard Rodgers was just so fantastic at writing melodic line, and then you have people like Burt Bacharach, also brilliant melody writers. And those are the kind of people that really sort of stood out for me in those early days.
I'm interested in the process, because obviously when you're writing a song, you have to be concise in form, whereas when you're doing something solo on your own or writing something symphonic, you can have a free rein. You can actually go with a flow. I mean, what is the process the same for you for both?
Well, I think there's a similarity in a sense, but you start to sort of condense a little earlier when you're writing songs and stuff. You know you've got to keep it within a little bit more of a sort of structure. But what I was doing was just, you know, allowing it to kind of, you just improvise and let things go. And then I listened back to some of the improvisations, and sometimes I just thought, well, I really like the whole of this, about sort of 2 minutes worth. I'm just going to keep it like that. Okay, I'll correct a few errors and embellish a little bit and stuff, but it's very much keep it as is, and I really enjoyed doing that. You know, I do like to try and keep that spontaneous, that first moment when you create something, which I think is special, because you think that's good. You know, it's nice to keep that sort of the free flow, I think.
What in classical music kind of rang your bells in the past? Because clearly, I mean, you've now gone towards writing orchestral pieces. And I dare say in time you'll dispense with the orchestrator altogether and do it yourself completely.
I just have to say that both the orchestrators I've used, they just do it better than I would at this point in time. It'd be lovely to be able to do it myself. And I think I could have done, particularly on this one, I think I could have done an orchestration, but it would have been simpler. You have to accept your limitations. And I got on very well with Paul. I just think he's a very talented musician all round.
This is Paul Englishby.
Paul Englishby, yeah. And there's something about the way a person who understands the orchestra, the way that I understand a group, in a sense. You know what I mean? It was just, he was able to get the songs out better than I ever would with an orchestra.
Well, before we talk about 6, which is the new album, I want to go back a bit to talk about 7, which was your first suite. It's interesting you've chosen the suite format in both cases, so they're almost like elaborated songs, aren't they?
In many ways, one big advantage of calling it sort of symphony or something is you can give all the titles things like sort of allegro, moderato and things, which is what I really would like to call the pieces. I don't really like giving them titles because that means people think of things, exactly. And I really just said it's just music. So, yeah, the pieces are individual. They work, hopefully, as certainly the structure of both the albums I've thought about quite long and hard. But in the end, I think all the pieces can be taken out of context and work just as well.
The trigger, if you like, for 7 was writing the score for Michael Winner's film, The Wicked Lady. Your music strikes me as very filmic, actually. I can see you writing more in the future. Is that something you'd like to do?
Well, after The Wicked Lady, of course, we were so busy as a group. I was asked to do a couple of films in the late 80s, which I had to sort of turn down because we were just touring all the time. When we got to the end, I'll try and do this, and I couldn't find anybody who would let me loose on their film. I mean, maybe I just didn't go about it the right way. I'm not a very pushy guy, and you need somebody who's prepared to do that. I thought there might be one or two people out there who'd liked old Genesis music and might think, yeah, give them a go. But it wasn't like that, really. And I did 1 or 2 other films. Nothing was very sort of fantastic. I mean, the film I enjoyed doing the most, in many ways, the best film I was involved in was The Show, which I did with Mike Rutherford.
Well, I'm sure once the word gets around, the floodgates are open. Well, you could find yourself inundated. Let's talk about a couple of movements from 7 that interest me. There are times when I think your pieces, the orchestral pieces, sound keyboard derived in the way the melodic line develops. But one piece, Black Down, which I gather you worked from string samples originally.
Well, I just played the whole thing actually on a it's done on a string machine, if you like. Very slow string sample, so everything has to be quite slow, which I quite like. And it just makes you think in a different way. You kind of always, you have to keep the sort of separation of the notes sort of different when you're thinking in strings and everything. And it was improvisation. For me, it's so much the best piece on Saturday.
It's gorgeous.
The rest of the album, I thought there was sort of, as you say, a lot of piano-based things. And some things worked well, but that one I particularly did from strings, and it was almost what inspired me to do the whole record. I thought this could be fantastic, just done with real strings.
It must have been a hell of a thrill to hear it roll out.
That one piece sounded good really from the word go, and probably because it is the most orchestral. That's the truth of it. The others are perhaps trying to hammer something else into shape occasionally, although works well at times. And it was just, it was built much the same way. I have 2 or 3 improvisations that I've done, and I just selected bits and pieces from them.
For someone who's worked in electronics and samplings with Genesis, I mean, there was a great deal of innovation that you were quite famous for. Has acoustic music always had a certain... Does it thrill you now?
Well, I love to hear the actual stuff played by real people. I mean, sometimes I do think I'd quite like to extend the palette slightly, you know, with sort of some of the sounds I've used over the years, you know, in terms of bottom end, which you can't quite get out of an orchestra and stuff, you know.
Even 10 double basses
right.
doesn't quite do it, does it?
One reason I wanted with the 7 very much to make it authentically sort of orchestral classical style. The trouble is, coming from the rock world, if you start introducing too much other stuff, then people don't really give you the benefit. They say, well, it's just, you know, it's just arranged rock music, you know, pop music. So I felt, you know, when I was writing this stuff, I thought, well, this really can all be orchestral. I wanted to avoid the piano completely, but it was the most satisfying thing, and I still get a lot of pleasure out of listening to that.
Earthlight, I think, is lovely too, but
yeah,
I think that is clearly...
Well, that again was written as a... I wrote that, I had just with string sample, and then I used, in fact, an oboe as a kind of lead line, and kept set up a couple of things, flutes and things, just so I could sort of get different tones.
Let's move to 6. What were the lessons really learned from 7? And did anything in the process change when you started work on 6?
The overall thing I wanted to do, I felt very time constrained when I did 7. Using an English orchestra, you know, it's incredibly expensive. And I really wanted to try and get some rehearsal time, I thought. And also to get rid of all it's all those bum notes that get in there, you know, when the score. Well, that takes about an hour to get rid of, and you've only got a session for an hour and a half or 2 hours, and most of the time you spent doing that. And I just thought, well, I want to get rid of all that. And I'd heard people had talked about recording in Prague. People had had a good experience, and I thought, I can do this. It's a lot cheaper to have the orchestra, therefore I can have more time. But actually, to be honest, I think I had a much longer process with Paul than I ever did with Simon Hale. With Paul, we went backwards and forwards lots of times. I went down and visited in his place and stuff, and came out and listened. And so some of the pieces went through about 6 or 7 sort of revisions, you know, all the time when we were talking about how things should work. Just little chord things, you know, just one note in the chord missing, and you think, oh, it doesn't sound as good, you know, got to get that in.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, the two big standout pieces in 6 are the 2 pieces with the obligato solo parts. Siren with the alto sax part, Martin Robertson. And let's start with that. I love the exultancy of the melody in that, and the way it kind of takes flight. That's something that's really comes very naturally to you. It's the music seems to, as I say, evolve, but it takes flight too.
It was kind of written on the piano, so what was the kind of little motif that felt really good on the piano, you know, and I sort of played it and I thought, well, that's good, and I sort of developed it into different ways and different keys. So always enjoyed doing it, you know, with Genesis over the years. We'd often set down a sort of a good rhythm. You know, Mike just was playing this rhythm, and then I'd play chords on top of it to try and sort of take it elsewhere. I really find that exciting, these little ideas you get and developments. And
do you know the Czech composer Martinu?
I do. I'm a big fan of Martinu, actually.
Well, that is what it reminded me of.
Oh, right. That's quite good.
Siren, that kind of ecstasy in the melody, and even the saxophone sound is something that Martinu would have done. Martin Robertson, I mean, is that a play did you write it with him in mind?
I wrote it with sax in mind. I mean, I've known Martin ever since he was this high. because his mother was a very close friend. And so I followed him through his whole life and everything. And he's got a sort of confidence about him that is great, really. And obviously he's done masses of work now, really.
He's worked with Mark
particularly the work with Mark Anthony. Yeah. Sort of a piece they did with Martin was on clarinet and Mark was on piano, and it was good. One would go like this, and then occasionally there was a shot bell, and they go bang like this, and it would sort of happen. Every so often, it kind of quite a thing. But anyhow, they obviously were close friends.
Now the violin-led piece, Blade, and you've got a real rising star on this one, Charlie Seam. But this has a real kind of highly embellished solo part, kind of Vivaldian almost solo part, which generates its own energy. Very exciting.
You know, I sort of had a sort of backcloth for what I knew could really work. It was done with a piano. An original part was done with a fast piano to get that rhythm feel going all the way through it. And then once I decided to do the sax solo, I thought, well, let's try a violin solo, because violin is the sort of most obvious, if you like, lead player. So I wanted to get something with a bit more speed on this one. One of the great advantages of synthesizers is they're quite easy to play fast on. And of course nowadays with the computers you can sort of correct all the mistakes you make. I really enjoyed doing it. I felt I had sort of like, 4 or 5 different sort of sections in it. I just let the violin kind of link them.
That was one of the things that was so great about all the great rockers, the guitarists and keyboard players, is those fantastic, what the word melismatic, those fantastically elaborate embellishments they would do, and which is part and parcel of the instruments, really.
Yeah, well, I think the guitar is like a violin. It's very expressive. I think I always felt in when I was writing pieces that if I really wanted to sort of tug the emotions, switch to guitar. Oh. Because the keyboard can get nice effect, but you can never get that sort of yearning quality.
Yeah.
And the guitar can just do that, because it's the bending and everything, I suppose, is what does it. So you get the same thing out of a violin.
It's the bending, absolutely.
It's there's definitely quite a strong parallel between their roles in their respective music genres, I think. And it was great fun. I mean, he's a great player.
So, what about the future? In a sense, the solo albums you've done, you're a one-man band. You're totally in control of what's happening around you. Do you want to do more of that? Do you want to do more orchestral stuff, film music? What are your inclinations at the moment for the future?
To some extent, it depends a bit how something like this goes. I mean, you can't deny that it has an effect on the way you think about things. I mean, I would like to think I would do more orchestral music, certainly. The film music has always been an option. I just never managed to sort of to get the work. Now I think I would want something that really, I was able to feel like it really get inside. In terms of the other side, the rock thing, well, we did try. Obviously, we did an album with another singer, Ray Wilson, as Genesis, and that was great fun for us to do. I mean, working with younger musicians and everything, and we thought the album was pretty good, but we thought, well, we've done that. That's how it is with that, really. But, I never know. I do miss, do like drums. I mean, that power. But on the other hand, you can't... Classical music is in a sort of slightly strange state that everyone can like sort of Beethoven or Elgar or whatever, but there's not great audience for many of the contemporary composers, really. I don't know anyone's really put out anything yet that's really set the world on fire, coming from the alternative background yet. When that happens, perhaps that will open it for everybody a little bit more.